Yeah, welcome to the technical stream session. I'm just going to get my pointer. So my name is Dylan Roberts. I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer for the City of Leeds, and I'm also the lead on the technical stream and strategy around the Yorkshire Number Care record. And
I'm Robert Higginbotham. I'm a Director of Synonetics, and I'm also the lead technical architect on System of Systems.
And what we're going to talk about today, quick overview. We're going to give an overview of why we're doing the LICRA, certainly from a technical perspective. What is an open platform approach and why are we adopting that? What each organisation has to do to plug in and how we're going to help with that. That's the summary of today's session. There's various guys in the room who are going to be involved in this, supporting it. So there's George at the front. He's the technical lead, and there's John at the front as well, who's the programme manager. And is Ken Eastwood here? Oh, anyway, he'll be good. He's from Doncaster, who's one of our Wave 1 organisations. So, why are we doing the LICRA? Well, the principal reason for doing the LICRA is that in every one of our organisational strategies, these are the ICS strategies and plans, and in the long-term plan, there is a requirement for us to integrate care. Whether or not that's potentially integrating teams working in localities, maybe in a primary care network, which could mean people working in a mental health organisation with people in acute, in the council, and maybe even third sector organisations working in combined teams. There's a need for them to share and view data around patient cohorts or people, or whether it's integrating across the region as a whole. So from a cancer perspective, for instance, there might be patients who are in Scarborough who need to go for tertiary care, for instance, in somewhere like Leeds or whatever, and what we want is the data to follow with them. So fundamentally, all of us have got similar objectives, and all of us are trying to do integrated care, so that the purpose of our LICRA bid is to enable us to do that quicker, faster, and hopefully for less money. But there's a greater ambition in Yorkshire Humber, so part of our LICRA bid was not just about enabling us to do integrated care quicker, but it was also about achieving a greater ambition, and that greater ambition is that the leaders across Yorkshire and Humber in particular want Yorkshire and Humber to differentiate themselves globally in some cases in terms of how they're solving the big issues to do with health and care. So as for instance, I don't know if people know, but there's a lot of discussions and work with government around the industrial strategy. And part of the industrial strategy grand challenges, for instance, are things around how do we address the issues of the ageing society? How do we use AI and data to gain greater insight into conditions and things like that? So from that perspective, one of the key things we want to do in this region is to basically be able to bid for those funds and try and differentiate this region in terms of developing the health tech market, or differentiate this region in terms of the use of data and research across the patch. Now, one of the prerequisites, and that's what government want actually, but one of the prerequisites of our LICRA bid, which is to help enable us to access all of that, is having a LICRA which covers a particular population size. So if you want to be the best for data and research, or bid for some of these grand challenge funds or digital innovation hub or whatever, fundamentally you've got to be at a particular population set, and that was touted at the time as needing to be over 3.6 million. Yorkshire and Humber is about 5.8, I think was mentioned earlier. So that's the other reason and the big ambition for us in Yorkshire and Humber why we want a LICRA and an integrated care record, or the ability to pull integrated data across the size of the Yorkshire and Humber footprint. This is the technical stream, so this is a technical diagram. So in terms of our ambition, our target, should I say, our target is based on this high-level architecture model. And what this basically describes is we're delivering the glue, the integration, which is between all of the different systems we've got here. We want to maximise the investment that people have already got in their existing systems. Lots of investment has been put into systems across Yorkshire and Humber, and there's a myriad of different local systems, whether they're on packages, whether they're in-house written, whether they're cloud-based or on-premise. Our fundamental thing to start with is to integrate and pull data together from all of those different systems. Yeah, so it can be viewed or combined at that regional level for enabling that integrated care and that left shift, whether or not that's at a local place-based level or whether or not it's on the region. But the other key thing about our LICRA programme and about the Yorkshire Number Care record is because we're doing it as an open platform. What we want to be able to do is be able to open up that data with the relevant IG arrangements and provide a platform on which we can start developing new innovations and capabilities on top of it. So maybe a person-held record might be one of the first ones off the block, so we might develop application Q here, for instance, which, because it works to some common standards in the way it's built and the way it integrates, then that can be reused across the region. Applications that potentially could be designed around individual people's needs. There are vendors in the health tech industry, for instance, who are talking to us now around how potentially their apps or their solutions could potentially work, which are designed around maybe managing particular conditions like diabetes or something, but integrate back into this system of systems so that we can potentially as clinicians or whatever see some of that data, and in the same way people can contribute their data. They will do that through this integration infrastructure we're going to talk about today. So yeah, what do we mean by open platforms? Well, we've set a set of clear design principles and standards in all that we're going to do. And in particular, all that we're going to do when it comes to the Yorkshire Number Care record components and capabilities. Yeah? First of all, we know we need to set some open data standards. So at the Yorkshire Number footprint level, if we are linking systems together, they've all got to work to a common data standard and model. We're setting that, and we're doing a lot of work in terms of determining the 5 profiles and the like around that. What we're saying is anything we build or do in Yorkshire Number and the Yorkshire Number Care record is based on open requirements and business cases. Anything that happens across this patch or we're involved in, it's openly available for anyone to use, reuse, nationally, locally, whatever. That is the principle. Clearly, we've got to work to open APIs. That's just, I guess, common sense, and in particular, real push jointly with system vendors to do the same. We're going to be working, there's an IG session separate for this, but again, open information governance. So from that perspective, as many common tool sets and models that we can use and reuse across the patch to enable us to deal with some of the information governance aspects and make sure that's openly available for everyone to see and understand. The Yorkshire Number Care record components themselves, a lot of them are built, not bought. So we've got suppliers who are helping us do that, but they're going to be open source components that can be freely and easily availably used across the patch. And then the final thing, which is the point that was raised earlier on, we will have a set of open tools available for citizen engagement. And we say citizen all the time, because I'm from local government originally, but fundamentally it's not just about the patients, it's about citizens more generally in terms of how you engage with citizens in terms of using some of these tools and services. A lot of this stuff just simply links and aligns with national policy. So people know about Chapter 5 of the long-term plan. People might also know about the policy paper which came out in October 2018, The Future of Healthcare, Our Vision for Digital Data, Technology, Health and Care. That in those documents they set some clear standards and guidelines which we as a region, as individual organisations across these regions should be adhering to. And we do, in terms of this particular programme. The other quick point about that is that the message that we're getting, certainly from the centre now, certainly with the NHSX coming into being, is that if you want any money going forward in future, you better be aligned to some of these standards. So I guess there's a bit of a quid pro quo here. I think we need to be doing some of this if we want some of the money to really progress some of the things and the ambitions that we've got. So, how are we doing it? Robert?
Thank you, Dylan. Right, the slide I'm showing you at the moment is where we are now. This is what the Yorkshire Number Care record looks like. Before I sort of talk too much about this slide, I just want to give you a picture as to the architecture, the principles behind this. The Yorkshire Number Care record is fundamentally a group of data providers and a group of data consumers. A data provider, it might be a system, it might be TPP, it might be EMIS, it might be a care setting like Rotherham or Leeds Teaching Hospitals. A data consumer is maybe a user interface, maybe a user interface. It could be other things as well. It could be an algorithm, it could be a population health management platform, which I'll talk about later. We haven't really got a presumption as to what a data consumer is. There is no YHCR user interface. It's whatever user interface can consume the data. Now back to the current state. We've been involved in a pilot process now for maybe 5-6 months. This pilot's involved Rotherham Acute, Doncaster Acute, Humber Teaching, Yorkshire Ambulance Service, Leeds Teaching Hospitals. 5 sort of fairly random locations when you look at the geography of Yorkshire. But what was important to us was to get willing players to come up quickly. We're sort of turning the lights on across Yorkshire. We're trying to make data available quite generally. Now, I know that the light in Rotherham looks quite dim when you're looking at it from Leeds, but as those lights come on around the patch, bringing Barnsley in, hospitals in Sheffield, then things start getting brighter and the richness of the data starts growing. So what we've got at the moment is really a synthetic data flowing between organisations. Each organisation is behaving as a data provider and a data consumer in the main. As a data provider, they expose their data using a standard FHIR standard. It's really important for us that we do adopt sort of common standards across the region. In order to be able to get a data consumer to address one of these data providers and say, give me your data, it's got to know what it's getting. The relationships, they're sort of managed, coordinated by some regional infrastructure. There's not a lot of this at the moment, but it basically simplifies how a data consumer can ask for some data. You can go to one point and say, tell me all about the appointments for this patient. It also sort of controls security, and it ensures there's a secure relationship. And there is the capability of persisting data. I'm about to show you a little bit of a video. This is a user interface. It's just been knocked up in somebody's bedroom, so it's not clinically safe. It's not the YHCR user interface. Don't treat this patient. What the user interface is going to show you is that it's able to address the system of systems as it currently is and pull back an aggregated record for a patient. Now, the record isn't complete in any way. It's, we're exposing what data we can expose, some problems, some encounters with the patient, some drugs. But it's bringing that back and it's joining the data together as a timeline of contact with the patient. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of this user interface, and we'll see how the system of systems is helping it do its job. But at the moment, the user interface is just issuing one query against the system of systems. Give me the patient and tell me everything you know about them.
That's a combination of data from
A combination of data from these sources up here: Doncaster, Humber, Leeds, Rotherham, Yorkshire Ambulance Service. We'll be moving on now. Okay, what you're about to see is an integration engine. So this is what's offering that sort of endpoint that the user interface is talking to. This is InterSystems Ensemble. It's a piece of integration technology that is receiving a request and then farming it out to all the different sources we know about that patient. Each of those lines represents one of those requests going out to Doncaster, Rotherham, wherever. And basically the request is saying, tell me about the patient and everything you know about them. Independently, they come back one at a time and they give us the data. And the data is then aggregated by the user interface. Now, this is exactly the same approach that the Leeds Care Record is using to grab that data, or the Rotherham Care Record. And it can be any user interface. We are thinking about standard user interfaces within the region, maybe offering some sort of model. But there is no presumption as to how you should be viewing the data. The data is all coming back in FHIR format. That's the guarantee that the user interface has got, that it can actually talk to all these systems. It knows exactly what format the data is going to come to it in. That was an aggregated view of the data. What we've just now done is say, drill into one source, just go to Doncaster and just get the data from there. There isn't any presumption as to how you're going to present this data, and I think that many user interfaces view it over tabs. This is just consolidating into a single record. I think as the maturity of these sort of approaches grow, then acceptance of a single consolidated record may become more acceptable. So at the moment, I've just spoken about a YHCR for the purposes of direct care. Population health management is really, really important. We're offering tooling from the YHCR, basically a platform that can be rolled out across the localities, and that platform will offer all the connectivity that's needed to go and grab data from the system of systems. The same source for direct care is the source for population health. This platform can be adopted by locality. It will pseudonymize data. It will provide some tooling for analyzing data. And it will allow data to be moved up to a regional level in an anonymized form as well. So, over to you, Dylan.
Thank you. Yeah, so what does each organisation have to do to plug in? Well, I think in the first instance, the first thing to know is that in terms of all that integration infrastructure, as I call it, all those components in the centre, they, once are built, will be freely available to be used and reused to take a lot of the heavy lifting, I would say, that's involved in doing integration. You just mentioned there about pseudonymisation, anonymisation, identity, and all of that type of thing. But to plug into this, what does an organisation need to do to be able to plug in? And a bit of a technical diagram here, but what we are looking to provide is an on-site fire proxy, a piece of software that is installed locally on your servers and your infrastructure to then integrate with your systems. Now, we can provide this to varying levels depending on what each organisation wants to do. Different organisations have got different capabilities and might want to integrate with the Yorkshire Number Care record in varying different ways. That's fair enough. We can have discussions about but fundamentally, at the basic level, what we want organisations to be able to do is work with us to integrate from their integration engines up into the fire proxy, and in particular, more importantly, do the data mapping from your data models to the Yorkshire Humber data model. Key thing about the fire proxy, clearly it's license free, as is the integration infrastructure that Robert was talking about. It's currently based on 2 platforms that we're developing in parallel and keen to test. There is a capability that works in systems on Ensemble, which is what we've got now running across the pilot sites. We're also developing an entirely self-contained open source approach based on Node.js, which is a product called Qt, which we're also going to be testing on. North Yorkshire Council, I think, being the first to test that one. In terms of the things you need to do, and bear in mind, if you're doing integrated care, or from a technology point of view, if you're doing integrated care, you're going to have to do this sort of stuff anyway. So these are just the key things to think about as either a data consumer or provider. In terms of integrating with your systems, clearly there's some work to be done there in terms of data validation, data structure mapping. The NHS number is key, and is the key, by the way, so just to remind that, especially for local authority colleagues, I appreciate it's a given in the NHS, but in the local authorities it's not to say that all systems have got the NHS number included in it, but that is the key. So there is some work to be done locally, but I guess the point I'd say is that regardless of your level of maturity, yeah, even if your data you feel might be in a mess for sake of argument, well, have the discussion, come and talk to us. We can basically integrate at different stages and at different levels. And as Robert alluded to, the data set can become richer and richer and richer as time goes on. We can incrementally basically add different data sources as we go and help with that work. But again, and I realise it's a bit integration 101, but it's, I guess, quite important. You know, data quality is an important thing when you're doing integration, but that is exactly the same as if you're doing integration locally as if you were doing it on this regional level and using these regional capabilities. So how are we going to help? Well, the first thing, and there's work ongoing at this moment in time where we're defining the detail around this, but there's going to be a Yorkshire Number Digital team. There's going to be a small footprint type of team which post the LICRA programme will be there to support and help people onboard these products and these capabilities, and of course maintain them and keep them going. We have got and we are developing a very comprehensive onboarding pack which will explain all the different things that you need to do, and it's wider than just the technical elements, and John here is the program manager on that, who is developing that pack, and we're testing it in particular with a lot of the Wave 2 sites, and thanks to Wave 1 sites for the learning that you've given in terms of informing that. So there is a complete onboarding pack that we'll have available. We are currently out to procurement for some partners to help with this. So we're putting a framework in place where ultimately organisations across this region, not just the Yorkshire Number Care Record team, will be able to commission sets of organisations who can do the whole soup to nuts really on any project, whether it's an integration project or a digital innovation project, whatever it might be, from discovery right through to delivery and potentially support. But what these vendors will know is they'll know the standards, they'll know the capabilities, and they know how we want to work from an open platform point of view across this patch. So you'll have that assurance in terms of then being able to support you. So again, if there are issues or challenges, there'll be a group of vendors available there, or partners, I'd say, to help with that. And also, as we said before, everything we're doing is open. So all of these, every single component which is part of Systems of Systems, and the fire proxy is document number 3 there, it's all documented, it's all available on the yhcr.org.download. So again, from our perspective, if people and technicians want to get into there, have a look at that, ask any questions or whatever, then please do so. We have got an architecture group, George Hope, who's here, who's part of the team. He leads, he's the primary secretary for that group. He leads and coordinates that. So again, from our perspective, that's got a lot of Wave 1 folk on it at the moment. But again, if people are interested in being involved in ratifying these designs or being involved in these designs, really keen to have more people on board on that, and speak to George later. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the use cases because a lot of the other sessions today is all about that. But we're conscious of the fact that there are lots of use cases, and there's use cases coming out all the time. The capability we've put in place, or we've developed, is a generic capability that can potentially be applied to multiple use cases. But as things are developed and those use cases land, everything that's around those use cases, from North Yorkshire Council, for instance, that's got to be documented into consistent formats and will be available to be shared, and anyone else can use that and to do their own thing. So that's the end of the formal presentation, but what I would like to do is ask Ken to pop up as a Wave 1, just to give us a bit of a view in terms of, well, what was it like for you, Ken?
So there's something about why did we decide that we wanted to be a front runner? And the reason we wanted to be a front runner was because it just makes sense, everything that Dylan and Robert have just been talking about. I spent quite a number of years working in central government, and with the advent of Government Digital Service, the move towards open standards, pretty well versed in that. But when it comes to working in the health sector, what I identified was just the number of different applications that we have with our data sitting in silos. I was speaking with David Crichton from Doncaster just this morning, who's a GP, who sees somewhere in the region of 30 patients on a daily basis. And his need is to have access to information about patients at the point of care seamlessly. Our consultants who work in our A&E department, their need is to seamlessly see that information when they're dealing with tens of patients coming into the A&E department. They want that information in a way that they can readily consume it without having to go through multiple different systems. So that need is what's driving this initiative. So we wanted to be involved. We wanted to understand from the beginning what we had to do in terms of understanding those data structures. At a conceptual level, this works and the understanding is really straightforward, and we were given a lot of help from Robert and his team. When we got into the technical detail, to be honest, it was pretty hard going for the first number of weeks. The constructs around about the data messaging and the FHIR standards, it took us quite a bit of time to get our head around about that. But you know, it's like anything that you do that's new, it takes a while until you get used to it. So once we had started messaging the FHIR messages, we'd adopted the proxy. We went through some fairly rigorous testing, and I think that testing program, we've all learned a lot from going through that testing, and that's going to make it a lot easier for anybody else who comes along and starts on the onboarding process. So I think what my kind of key feedback would be, please engage with this. If you'd like to come to Doncaster, if you'd like to see what we've been doing, if you'd like to speak with any of the programmers in my team that have been working on this, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thanks, thanks for that, Ken. So, I mean, it's not the actual end because we have the opportunity to get some questions and get into discussion about this. So, really keen to get some questions. I'm just going to put the Slido thing up as well. So, you have got the option from our perspective. If you want to ask questions from the floor, that's probably a bit more interactive. But if you want to use the Slido, then that's available too. We're Workshop D, Herringbourne, sorry. So this is the Slido. Will that just appear, will it, I guess?
Yeah, so
as questions come... Oh, okay, no questions so far. So any particular questions or anything anyone want to bring? Okay. I'll bring you the mic if that's all right, so you can be on candid camera then.
So in the Bradford locality, we use System 1 quite a lot across the patch. Are you having any architectural discussions with TPP, for example, to feed directly into the aggregator rather than us having to put integration engines on site?
Do you want to take that? Yeah, might as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to TPP daily. I haven't got that much positive to actually report back just to this particular stage. We are taking a pragmatic approach to TPP. We're going to be taking the strategic reporting extract, and we are FHIR enabling a strategic reporting extract. We're working with a community trust over in Humber, some GPs in that area, a hospice, in order to get some representative data, and we're in the process of doing that mapping now. Now, how we deliver that at scale, I think, is still out for question, but I think that we'd probably look to consolidate into a single reporting unit and to offer a consolidated TPP data set. TPP are referred to GP Connect, and I think it's too long term for us to tell you the truth at the moment, and we haven't managed to trigger an interest directly actually in working with the LICRA just yet.
But that is our long-term aim, GP Connect. Just for anyone in NHS England here. Okay.
Thanks. The thing that I notice is there doesn't seem to be much in the way of local authority engagement especially around the areas of social care in what you've been presenting. Can you give me some idea what your barriers are or why they aren't engaged in that?
Yeah, well, there is quite a bit of local authority engagement. One of our pilot sites is North Yorkshire Council. The reason we selected North Yorkshire Council, don't get me wrong, there were not many people rushing forward to be a pilot in Wave 1 from the local authority community. I think the primary reason for that was simply capacity, resources and ability to properly engage these organisations. There is some work you have to do, do you know what I mean? But North Yorkshire did come forward, and one of the things that we were really keen to do from a local authority community point of view is get a liquid logic site. So of the social care systems, Liquid Logic covers about 75% of the patch. That said, we've also got Kevin Woodcock, who's our he's here somewhere today, but who's our local government rep on the architecture group, and also there's an event on the 11th of July at Pontefract Racecourse, whereby through the Association of Directors of Adult Social Care Network, there is an event for social care advanced practitioners. So if any social care folk are in this room, there's an event with free sausage sandwiches as an opener from lunchtime on the 11th of July for advanced practitioners to start developing through some of the use cases. And there's also a guy called Neil Bartram who's also here today. He might not be in this audience, but he's also here today, also from North Yorkshire Council. His role is to do a lot of the local authority engagement. So if you don't know him, link out to Neil Bartram from North Yorkshire Council, who can give you all sorts of details around that. Hang on a minute, Ken.
So at Doncaster, we're already doing work with Notts County Council. We're already flowing data using fire standards. So I think it's just really seamless. We do not anticipate any problems with connecting into local authorities.
Okay, there's a gentleman there. Yeah. Do you mind passing that back? Yeah.
So a quick question. I'm a community pharmacist. So I can't see how this model will work for community pharmacy when you've got single entity pharmacists up to the multiples, sort of like the Boots, Lloyds, etc. You know, how or where do you see pharmacists sitting in there with somebody supplying us with information?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's the benefit of this capability is that fundamentally a lot of the capability is license free, and therefore, from my perspective, don't know the requirements or the use cases around community pharmacy, and it'd be great to talk to you about how we develop some of those use cases. But whether or not you're a singular pharmacy in a village in North Yorkshire, or you're part of Lloyd's Pharmacy Group or whatever, then you know, we will be able to provide that capability and that support via a web browser. As long as you've got connection to the internet, you know, fundamentally we should be able to, with the relevant training, etc., provide you access to some of that information if there's a use case around it, for sure. I think it gives us this capability gives us the flexibility to do that. Do you want to add to that, Robert?
Yeah, only to say that really the system of systems, it's agnostic as to who's using it and who's connecting to it. So, you know, if Lloyd's Pharmacy as a data consumer need to get access to the medical record for a patient, it will be available through the system of systems. I mean, I guess you probably are referring to sort of prescribing and the interaction between the pharmacist on a transaction by transaction basis. I mean, I don't think, you know, we haven't addressed it yet, but, you know, we're building the infrastructure in order to move messages between individual locations. So a point of case is in an ambulance, we're building the infrastructure to accept a discharge from an ambulance into an ED department. So if we can model the transactions for a pharmacist in a similar way, then we would look to take them on board, but we need to work together.
Okay, there's a question there. Robert, do you mind taking that mic to that gentleman there? We probably need to get to these Slido ones as well at some point.
Thank you. In terms of Lycra to Lycra integration, where in the plan is that? And do you think that the approach taken to architecture and IG for Yorkshire and Humber, how mutually compatible is that to the other Lycra areas who've taken different approaches?
Okay. I mean, we built the architecture very much with intra-Lycra communication in mind, so that just as we can aggregate data from data providers within the Yorkshire and Humber region, what we're seeing is as another Lycra could approach us and say, give us the data about a patient in a very, very similar way. I think we're working...
And the other way around?
And the other way around. Now, in order to do that, we need to sort of harmonise standards across the Lycras, and that's what we're working with NHSX to do, and individual Lycras. So we were down in London last week on the hackathon, and London showed that they could consume from our fire endpoint, and we could consume from London's. We've got shared care from the Northwest coming in tomorrow to actually talk about our plans as to how we can share some technology to do it. So we're all sort of thinking about this, and it's the big end game, I think.
Can I add a little bit to that, Robert?
you want to introduce yourself as well, George?
George Hope, Integration Architect on the LICRA. What I would add to what Robert says is that NHS England have an Inter-LICRA forum, and the IG framework, Inter-LICRA IG framework, is established by them, and we're following their standards. And I don't know whether Johnny Chagger's in the room, but he's been in sort of a fairly leading light at that forum about, how the IG is going to work into LICRA, and he's from Yorkshire and Humber, and he's our rep on that, and I support him from a techie perspective sort of thing. So, yeah, there is a national framework which we're adopting, going back to the point this morning about standards and adopting common standards. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Should we just go to a couple on here, and then I'll come back to the audience if that's all right. So I understand there's been some training made available for some of our technical teams. Can you give us some more details of that? Do you want to answer that, Robert, in terms of the fire, all the training? Really?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we've established quite a lot of training material now. So we've run a number of courses which were initially aimed at very technical people trying to establish what fire really meant, what the work was involved in actually fire enabling a data source. We've also lifted that up a level now, so we can communicate at a more architectural level, maybe CIO type level, less emphasis on the programming. And I think the next direction of travel is to be able to communicate on a clinical level. Where we're beginning to move with the program is we're showing the technology can work. What we need to start worrying about is data, I think, and the consistency of data. Now, for that, we really do need to get clinical involvement and enthusiasm for modelling data actually in the fire standard.
Yeah, I mean, actually part of the onboarding is that any organisation who wants to onboard the Wave 2 organisations or whomever, at the end of this, I'll get all the team to stand up, and on the Yorkshire Number Care Record site, you'll get details of who the different team members are, how to get in touch with them and all of that for afterwards, or you can talk to them today. But definitely when it comes to running courses, especially around the whole fire piece, the technical aspects, certainly our aspects, and there's going to be some other ones about other aspects outside the technology stream, really keen to get those put on, and I'd strongly recommend doing those before you even think about starting to onboard. Joe?
Hi, Joe Waller. Just intervening because I had a question relevant to both the previous two questions, which was just how you're developing the fire standards and how those are being agreed and all those kind of things.
Okay.
Fire profile.
Yeah. I mean, we're working from Care Connect as our basis, so we're not trying to do anything which is inconsistent with the national direction. We do recognise, though, that Care Connect isn't going down to a sufficient level of precision for us. We've established a data architecture design authority who is going to take the ownership of actually evolving a standard within Yorkshire and publishing that standard back out again. So we're not trying to be the Yorkshire Fire profile, but we do need to actually work on standard. We need to be ahead. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the work that George is doing is coordinating that. There's we really desperately wanted, and if there's any clinicians in this room, a clinical lead to chair our data design authority meeting. We have got Monica Jones, who's leading the population health stream, has got a great understanding of data, currently chairing that. And again, if people want to be involved in any of that shaping, then please get involved in that. Just conscious of a couple of the other questions about pilot sites. So there is some, as well as the standard slide deck, there's some other material here that the slides are available for people to download and use and all of that type of thing. These are the pilot sites. Someone mentioned North Yorkshire Council. The key thing about these sites, by the way, Wave 1 and Wave 2, part of their commitment is that if you want any learning or talk to people or whatever about experiences, how to do whatever, they're the people to go to. So the local authority question earlier on, North Yorkshire Council, Robert Ling's the CIO there, Neil Bartram's the link in the lead, Andrew Whitaker's the architect. Basically, fill your boots basically. They are there to help and assist. That's part of the deal about being on there. So they're the first two phases. There was a question about the Architecture Forum that George organises and runs. That's who's on the Architecture Forum at the moment. Again, when it comes to things like some of the fire problems, for instance, or the fire opportunities, defining the fire standards, when it comes to reviewing those technical documents, how these work, etc., these are the people who are doing that and putting the work in to do that. So it's representative of the region. Again, other people can come on board there. If people drop off this, we're looking for new members. And if you're looking at and interested in being involved, it's a great way of getting some learning. I'm just going to go back to the questions again in case we missed something. Oh, are you saying, okay. Are you saying that if we develop app components or apps, that these could be shared via a regional app stores, who will set the standards and approaches? Yeah, I mean, but basically, when we say apps, we don't necessarily mean mobile phone apps, but same sort of principle, I guess. The intention is absolutely that we will be looking to have a situation in the dream world that local organisations might develop an application to do something specific or individual. If it's working to some common standards, then from our perspective, we would be really chuffed to be able to put that in a regional app store that others could download. And that would go into the regional app stores, coming back to the open piece with open requirements, open business case, specificate, all of that. That is absolutely the intent. The other thing I'd say as well is that, and Helm, if you go into the Helm session, that's our first, I guess that'll be our first innovative application, the ability for people to contribute data. But I guess the other thing is that our intent as well is we are discussing through Yorkshire Humber Academic Health Science Network and their Propel Accelerator, we are discussing with vendors as well. If vendors want to develop individualised applications or services or apps or whatever, DigiBeat, for instance, has been an organisation we've been talking about. Some organisations are keen also to plug in as well. So hopefully we can maybe start creating a bit of a marketplace around this. That would be the I guess the dream. So yeah. What does FHIR stand for, Robert?
Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. So it's a standard developed by the HL7 organisation. If you go to hl7.org, you can get all the details published well. We're adopting S2U3 as our baseline standard.
Oh, wow, there's loads coming in now. So will the Helm person held record connect into this infrastructure? And no, yes, it will. So the Helm, Helm is part of the Lycra programme. So absolutely, Helm will plug into System of Systems. So therefore, if people were to adopt Helm, it's got NHS login integrated with it, which we heard earlier on, then it will plug in via... Go on, Robert.
Yeah, I was just going to say Helm is already connected to the System of Systems. So when you log into Helm, you get asked for your consent to share data, and that's published actually into the System of Systems and acts as a control mechanism as to whether we release the data to a consumer.
Yeah. Do we have a schedule of organisations that want to join? Apart from the ones I put on the slide, no, we don't. If organisations do want to join, then please come forward, let us know, whatever, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, there are potential capacity and resource constraints in terms of what we can, do and take on. But as I said, we're in the middle of a procurement process to bring on a group of innovative suppliers who might be able to help us to do that and onboard a lot quicker. So if people do want to come on and use this capability, whether you want to use this capability just to do if someone wants to do a local integration, hull to hull hospital to hull council or something, or if you don't, it doesn't have to be, the use case doesn't have to be big regional integration. The use case can be any integration use case. This capability, in theory, could be adapted to do that. Okay.
NHS number?
NHS
number, the question is whether we're dependent on the NHS number. Well, the YHCR is dependent on the NHS number. We'll only ask data to be released if an NHS number can be provided to us. Now, the Lycra can actually help with the sourcing of an NHS number. We often have search facilities over the golden patient record held in the centre, but in order to actually request data, the NHS number is key.
Yeah. Is that your question from before, Joe? Yeah, I thought so. So how does the IG work? Who's the data controller? Well, there's different stages to this. At this moment in time, this capability is kindly hosted by Rotherham. There is an instance for standby and fallback at Leeds Teaching Hospital as well. So at this moment in time, Rotherham are ultimately the data controller. That said, the plan is to move to an intermediate setting and then ultimately move to the eventual, and it's not 100%, but probably move to the cloud because that's what the centre wanted to do, but not if it doesn't make sense. So there will have to be some consideration and discussion about who the who the data controller is and the IG aspects around that at that point. There is an IG workshop where there'll be discussion about a regional IG agreement that's been pulled together with shared risk around that. So I'd suggest people go to that as well. Sorry, was there a question there?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What's your approach to identity and access management?
Oh, Robert's favourite subject.
Okay, identity and access management. There is a gateway in the middle of the LICRA which requires the identity of an individual using the LICRA to be established. We're using the OAuth principles, so that gateway is actually authorising access to the LICRA, not authenticating an end user. We require a data consumer to authenticate the end user and establish their role, establish their rights to access the YHCR, and there is a trusted relationship between the consumer and the centre, public key infrastructure really, which allows us to say this is the person who's done the authentication, this is the claim they're making for access to data, and this is our token that we're going to give back, the key to the door. Does that answer the question? Partly.
So that means that the end system is being trusted to ensure that that person is allowed to see that record, and that's outside of your concern as far as the...
That's the approach we're adopting, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we do, and we have. Well, number one, we have governance responsibilities. A data consumer has got to sign up to, and a certain level of auditing that we will test and say that this is a prerequisite to gaining access. And when making the claim for access, you actually establish a reason for accessing the YHCR, and that reason for access and a high-level role description determines what data you can access and whether you're working in a patient-centric way or whether you can do broad brush searches.
Yeah. Okay. It said something about System 1 users. Anyway, would you advise organiser to wait until you've resolved the integration rather than putting our organisation? Yeah. So just to be clear on the closed system the GP system situation, we as a LICRA, hopefully with the backing of the centre, are looking to, as Robert alluded to before, looking to resolve that situation as best as we can, let's call it centrally. So therefore, that which we get on from those systems, we will then, if you connect to systems, we will give you the best that we can. Basically, that's the premise there. Don't attempt to do that. You can if you want, but you don't need to attempt to do that yourselves. We'll be trying to take that on. That said, there was a question earlier on about, there it is, System 1 users, have there been any thoughts about using a separate UI to at least consume data from the... as it stands now, when it comes to user interfaces or portals, clearly there is a situation right now across Humber Coast and Vale where what was the Leeds Care Record portal has been rolled out to allow access to data from Leeds teaching hospitals and the like. That's happening, but fundamentally, I think one of the things we've got from this programme is that we have got proposals to develop a standard user portal framework, UI framework, that people could just use and adopt to access that data. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at options at the moment for how we can get something up quickly. Quickly being over a couple of months' time frame, but also then how we can bring a community around that user interface to make it into a Yorkshire and Humber user interface and open the development up.
But the initial intention was, or the thought was, that organisations would want to consume the data and and surface that in their own portals. So it's whichever way really, but we are going to be because of the demand for it. We are going to be developing a portal offering. Would you advise it? Okay, we've talked about that. How will you be defining and agreeing the 5 profiles? We've talked about that. Is that how would you engage with clinicians to ensure clinical service delivery strategies aligned with new opportunities afforded by system of systems? Good point. John, do you want to answer the question?
Okay, so how would you engage with clinicians to ensure your clinical service delivery strategy is aligned? I think this is a really important point. So I'm John Temple, I'm the project manager for System of Systems, and what's clear is the 12 pilot sites, what we did was we split them into 2 waves. The first wave of 5 or 6, we made it very much technically driven. We were proving technology, so the regional infrastructure that Cynetics developed, we wanted to make sure we actually understood how it worked. The second wave of organisations that Dylan showed you before, we've just started to engage with, and we're making it very much clinically driven. So we're asking those organisations to come up with clinical use cases. So for instance, Harrogate Acute Trust have a very clear clinical use case already defined, which publishes data out which North Yorks County Council will subsequently consume. And we've got clinicians and social care experts driving that. So we've flipped it over, really. We don't want it to be a technically led implementation going forward. We want clinical engagement. We have clinicians within our programme, and we are insisting on, and sorry, I do say clinician, I do mean clinician and social care expert. We are insisting on having those business users drive the implementation for us. So they will come up with those use cases for us. I hope that answers the question.
Do you want to take the primary care data one, Robert, again?
Okay, no mention of primary care data. We need to pull data from TPP and EMIS primarily. We know that we've got to do the work in most cases. EMIS has got a relatively open interface, which they call CRV. We're pulling data from EMIS and exposing over FHIR using that method. TPP, we're pulling from the strategic reporting extract. It's under development at the moment. I'd hope to be able to show people the TPP data, within probably by the middle of August.
Yeah. Would you say, Robert, that even though it's not ideal in terms of HTML data, we could provide a view to that data from systems, even if it's not structured?
Yeah, we can. We can wrap HTML up in compositions in FHIR terms and deliver that. So there is always a plan B, I think, there. But certainly structured data is where we're really, where we're trying to go.
Yeah, and we are meeting and pushing hard with said vendors, which I think many people have been for many years. So we'll see how we get on with that. Could this be directly linked to the NHS app? Well, the Helm programme, there's a Helm workshop session as well, is the person held record project as part of the Yorkshire Number Care record. That is about the premise of patients actually holding their own data and controlling their own data and sharing that as they want with the care system. Part of that work is, as we've mentioned, we've worked with the NHS login team, so you would use the NHS login capability to not only get access to NHS app, but also get access to Helm. Helm and NHS app will be able to interoperate. When I say interoperate, viewer style, there's no data flowing between the two. From our perspective, we're not clear what the future direction of NHS app is yet in terms of what was alluded to this morning from John Farrington in terms of access to data. We would hope that they would be aligned to what Lycra's are doing, and we would hope, but we don't. I guess the answer to that is we don't know yet. But we would hope to be able to integrate with NHS app, absolutely. Keen to understand the IG angle. Who remains the data controller ease? Don't get me wrong, I'm not massively an IG expert. There is a guy called Johnny Chagger who's leading on some of that, so there is a stream on that as well, so probably best to connect you on that. But in terms of IG now, the data controller is Rotherham. I guess it just moves on from there.
Yeah, the IG stream is really, really active. It's working at a national level and at a local level. We've done some workshops on IG, and I think we'll probably be doing a number of others. Johnny is currently working on a data processing agreement, which will establish exactly what roles and responsibilities are going to look like in the Lycra.
If you're a TPP organisation, just get in touch. There are different ways in which we can, if you're a TPP only organisation, please still get in touch. We can work through options and the like with you. There are TPP organisations on now, aren't there, obviously. How can we find out what data exists in the YHCR to identify potential use cases?
Okay, there is the YHCR Abstract Cookbook. It's a document which is published on yhcr.org. Has an initial attempt at prioritising maturity in terms of offering data. So, our data set is defined by fire. You go to hl7.org and you can understand what a fire resource actually gives you, at least in abstract terms. And these have been prioritised. I think the running order is going to change over time as we address new use cases. But we've got an initial idea of what a basic level of maturity and a more advanced level of maturities look like, and they are published.
Would you be allowed access to the record if your organisation is not a provider of data? Well, yes, absolutely, yeah. You can have it's up to you whether you want to consume or provide. But yeah, yes is the answer to that, I guess. Joe, thanks for this one, Joe. What is the process for supporting a subject access request? Will the SAR simply identify the organisation? I don't know the answer to that.
Might be one for the IG.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe your last answer, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right, wow.
I mean, there will be audit, obviously, in the middle, so we will know where data has gone, who provided it, who consumed it.
Is it worth just on that, Robert? Is it worth just a quick explanation about that, because it was a key requirement of the bid in terms of auditing? So auditing is it worth just to finish off 1 minute on what the auditing capability is hoping to do?
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, every request that travels through the centre is audited, and the data that is actually revealed as a consequence of that data is audited actually in the centre. These audit records are maintained in a common FHIR format, and they're the same format that data providers will maintain their version of a record. And so it's possible to do a search across the whole region and say, everybody, agree on what your perspective of that particular point of data release was.
Okay, we're getting to the end of the session now. Appreciate we've had a lot of questions and discussion there through Slido and in the audience. Just to say thanks very much for being part of this session. What I would say is if people who've been involved in Wave 1, can you stand up and just to basically, so people know who you are, so George, Robert, Rob, Care, so at the end of the day, there will be, on the Yorkshire Number Care Records site, there will be pen pictures of these guys, short little vox pops, a minute video so you know who they are, contact details and all that if you want to talk to any of the guys, and obviously they're available today for any discussion about anything else outside and in the breaks, etc. Thanks very much for coming to our session.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, bye.